And next up is a solo talk from David Philippson of Dataseat on understanding SKAN 4.0 and its implications. So big round of applause for David Philippson, please, as he comes to the stage.
Hello everyone, and welcome and thank you for joining. My name is David Philippson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a business called Dataseat. Dataseat became part of Verve Group on the 1st of July last year. I'm here to talk to you about Apple's SK ad network attribution system, or what some people refer to as SKAD or SKAN. And specifically, I'll be speaking to you about SKAN 4.0, which is the attribution system that Apple released in Q4 last year. But before I go into the detail, just to establish some credibility with you, my audience as a subject matter expert on all things attribution and programmatic. 12 years ago, showing how old I am here, 12 years ago I founded what was arguably one of the first MMPs. It was called AdX Tracking. We sold that to a company called Criteo, and at Criteo my team built one of the first in-app retargeting products or value propositions. Now it's interesting, it was whilst I was at Criteo that Apple made some of their first moves in privacy. They introduced ITP, so Intelligent Tracking Prevention 1 and 2. That was limiting first and third party cookies in the Safari browser. Well, that was when I was at the end of my tenure at Criteo and my entrepreneurial spirit started planning, and I developed the thesis that I was convinced that Safari is really just a test bed for iOS, and I was convinced that IDFA was going to disappear in the Apple operating system. That led to me starting Dataseat. Dataseat is a DSP. We focus on gaming companies and driving user acquisition without any reliance on IDFA. So the majority of UA in our industry has been driven by behavioral, profile-based targeting of individual users. If IDFA disappears, then you're left with contextual. So Dataseat is a contextual DSP that drives user acquisition without any reliance on IDFA. Anyway, that's my background, and you can understand how, therefore, I've done my Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours on all things attribution and programmatic. So that's the last of selling I'm going to be doing. Really my objective is just to share some of my knowledge with you as marketeers, as growth managers, as monetization managers, because I think the more you know, the better prepared you will ultimately be. So a brief agenda, this is a 20-minute talk. I'm going to be flying through quite a lot of this. I'm going to be talking about some assumptions. I'm going to be talking about some fundamentals around SKAN. I'll be talking about different versions of SKAN and why it's important to understand their attributes. You can't talk about this subject without talking about privacy thresholds. And then I'm going to be highlighting some of the nuances with SKAN 4, talk about mobile web, and then I'll be drawing some conclusions. So without stating the obvious, well, it is stating the obvious, SKAN is an attribution system for advertisers. But I believe it is just important that monetization understands SKAN and how it works, because anything that affects the demand side obviously affects the supply side. So I think it is just as important for monetization leaders to understand it as much as growth. Today, the full effects of SKAN have not been felt. I've heard quite a lot of people saying, well, we're told winter's coming and it hasn't really arrived that bad. Well, the status quo has been maintained because MMPs and the whole industry, most of us in this room, including DSPs, SDK ad networks, and advertisers, still continue to use probabilistic attribution or fingerprinting. Only when Apple enforces a ban on probabilistic matching will the full effects of SKAN be felt. And to be clear, that is going to be have far more fundamental effects on you, on us as an industry, than any small differences between SKAN 3.2 and SKAN 4. Okay, going more into the detail. It's a very complex subject, but do not worry, I'm not going to spend time talking about this. This is a schematic from a bid through to a SKAN attribution back to an ad network. I could spend hours talking about this, but I shan't. But there is a very good podcast of me on Mobile User Acquisition Show explaining that. I use that for new starters in my team. Lots of my gaming clients use it to try and get people up to speed. So to talk about SKAN 4, I've got to just assume there's some base level knowledge. If some of that's lacking, please do watch that. It's quite good. But it will give you those fundamentals that I've got to assume to go into the details of this particular talk. Okay, right, so going into some of the details. Now, I must do as I preach. I'll always explain what a graph is before I go into the detail. My x-axis is time. That's days. My y-axis is number of downloads for one particular client of ours. Color is different versions of SKAN. Now, what you should take away from this is at any one point in time, you are going to be dealing with different versions of SKAN. It's a bit of a shit show, to be honest. It will get better, but this is the equivalent of having like 3 different MMPs with 3 different attribution systems on one of your games. It's incredibly complex. SKAN 2 was click-through only. SKAN 2.2 was click-through and view-through. SKAN 3 was click-through, view-through, and multi-touch. And SKAN 4 that's just been released is all of the above plus some new stuff. And you've got to plan for, well, actually, I could be running a campaign that's using all 3 of those. Now, I'm often asked when I say that, well, can't we just run on SKAN 4? And the answer is no, and I'll explain why. Well, unlike an iOS rollout, Apple will be able to push out iOS 17 in a couple of months. In 2 or 3 months, they can push that out to consumer devices, and they'll be at 80, 90% within a few months. That isn't the case with versions of SKAN. A version of SKAN requires, first of all, the SSPs, so the AppLovins, the Googles, the Fiber, the Chartboost, to update their SDKs. Then the gaming publishers themselves have got to update their app to be compatible, implement the SDK, submit it to store, and then the consumers have then got to update to that then latest version. So it takes a year plus. So you're going to be dealing with multiple versions of SKAN for a long time. And my belief is that those that understand it, both on the monetization and on the growth side, those that understand it are going to be most capable to kind of ride the wave and survive and thrive through what I do believe will be more turbulence to come. And I encourage not just to outsource it all to your MMP. Don't just say, my MMP's there. They're a super valuable partner, but the more you understand it as growth managers and then monetization managers, I believe the better position you'll be in. This is a bit of code. This is a payload from a SK ad network install that is sent from an iOS device to an ad network. Now I'm just going to call out a few of the fundamental things here and some of the new things. SKAN version. It's the first thing. It's really important. This almost allows some cohort analysis back to the version of SKAN. Should be paying attention to that. Source identifier. Apple likes to make our lives complex. That used to be called campaign ID. So you may see me swapping or people swapping between campaign ID and source identifier. That's the variable that is in the ad network's control to optimize the campaign. You've got re-download true or false. That's cool because MMPs couldn't really track a re-download or not. Source domain, that's new. That used to just be source app. Source domain now means you can track a SKAN download back to web, back to a website domain. So that is new. Fidelity type, that's multi-touch. Did you win? Well, it was multi-touch, but did you win the install? That's what did win true is. And coarse-grained conversion value, that is one of SKAN 4's new attributes, which I'll be talking to you more about. And also post-back sequence, there's multiple events. So that's going to tell you is this the first event, the second, or the third. So that's some of the, just touching on some of the new things, which I will go into more detail on. You cannot talk about SKAN without talking about privacy thresholds. I'm going to explain what this chart is. My x-axis is time. My y-axis is number of downloads. Gray is bad. Gray is where the source identifier, so this is the publisher that has driven the download. Gray is bad. That's when it's come back null. It's below the privacy threshold. And by the way, this is anonymized, but it's one of my clients that's driving 1,000 installs a day. So I'd argue that was a medium to large app developer. And you can see that 50% of their installs, the publisher that drove it, was coming back null. So it's challenging, to say the least. But this has got some implications, which I believe hasn't yet kind of manifested in the industry. I believe a strong implication here is that ad networks and DSPs, when this becomes the only norm, we're going to have an incentive to spend more with less publishers. If I've got a budget If I'm able to maintain performance but put that spend through less publishers, it's more likely I'm going to get that visibility. I'll be above the privacy threshold. As marketeers, you have a similar dynamic. If you were spending $1 million, whatever, $100,000 with 5 different ad networks, in the future, I believe you're going to be better off spending more with less ad networks. It's the same dynamic. The more spend you can put through fewer ad networks, fewer DSPs, I believe that those ad networks and DSPs are then going to get more insights to optimize those campaigns. I believe these are unintentional, unthought through ramifications, but it could have a negative consequence on medium, long-tail publishers. You may be driving some quality installs, but when this becomes the norm, if an advertiser can't know it's you driving those quality installs, well then they're probably going to go to some of the big ones. I have seen Apple having a track record in listening. It's one of the reasons I do these speeches. Maybe they listen, and I would like to see as a SKAN 5, is there some dynamic privacy threshold that you can have, not to penalise medium and small developers. Otherwise, I believe they will feel some of the pain. Conversion values. This is what you, the advertiser, the developer, sets. This is what people have been talking about that 6-bit up to 64 variables. These are the in-app events that are happening. They are also subject to a privacy threshold. In here, again, time, volume of downloads, light blue is bad. So even for a medium to large advertiser, they're having a lot of their conversion values hashed out, arguably 10 to 20%. The smaller you are, the less installs that you're driving, the higher that percentage will be, where you're not actually getting that visibility. Now, this is one of the areas where SKAN 4 has made some slight improvements on. And now I'm going to go into some of those. First of all, in previous versions of SKAN, you were largely limited to one postback within the first 24 hours, which compared to infinity LTV tracking over 365 days, it was going from infinity to 1. 1 was pretty bad in the first 24 hours. Apple is now allowing up to 3 postbacks. Yay! It sounds 3 times better, but arguably compared to infinity, it's still pretty rubbish. But still, it's 3 postbacks, but I'll just explain what it is. So you'll have 1 postback in that first period, which is from day 0 to day 2. You can then have a second postback between day 3 and day 7, and a third postback between days 8 and 35. You can cut that, the day 35 to a shorter time window if you're done waiting. But headline is more postbacks. They have also introduced a new concept. If the conversion value, your 64 variables, were your events, which could be level 1, level 5, tutorial completion, beat the bad boss, all the way up to depositing $1.99, all the way up to depositing $99.99, those would typically be your conversion values. Apple have introduced a hierarchy above that, which is low, medium, and high. And this is important if you think about, if you're getting a load of conversion values back below the privacy threshold where it's null, what you will get with SKAN 4 is at least they'll tell you whether it is a low, medium, or high. So if there's one takeaway from this presentation, I believe that marketeers, monetization managers, and data scientists in your firms need to be working together to correctly bucket, or at least start with a theory, a thesis to say, well, this is where we'll start and this is what we'll test. But it's what events get put into low, medium, or high to allow some form of optimization or decision-making beyond being completely blind. I've been doing some workshops and having lots of discussions with clients. If anyone would like to talk to me further about that afterwards, I'll happily do so. But I think if you're an IAP developer, deciding at what price point goes between medium or high will be one of the critical things. How do I differentiate between a $1.99 deposit and a $29.99 deposit? That's going to be one of the critical variables. So that's updates on conversion values. A significant update, and this one is a big deal, but it really hasn't been discussed much. Now, the reason it isn't discussed much is because advertisers, publishers don't use it, that you don't control it. It's on the ad network side. Now, ad networks typically aren't that transparent. They certainly don't like talking about bad news. I don't mind. I like talking about bad news and challenges because it creates opportunities. I'll tell you what the bad news was. The bad news was an ad network only had the last 2 digits. We had up to 99. We had 2 zeros that we could populate from 00 up to 99 to optimize a campaign. Now, that had to mean something to an ad network, that variable. Now, what Apple has done is gone, well, you can have more than 100. You can now have 9,999. Yay. Or rather, that's what we thought was the case. But what you'll get used to with Apple, and certainly attribution and privacy, what they give with one hand, they kind of take away with another. It's not 9,999. They've actually split those 4 digits up into 3 parts. We remain with the lower 2 digits, up to 99. We're then giving another digit from 0 to 9, and then another digit. And they are all subject to privacy thresholds. And I'll give you an example of these privacy thresholds, and then I'm going to give you a user case of how an ad network could use them. So, for example, if we were driving low volume, these are examples. This hasn't been, this isn't, specific facts. I'm just giving examples so you can understand. If we drove 5 installs in a day, we may get null 39. If we drove 25, we may get null 739. If we drove 100 installs in a day, we may get 5739. So it isn't just one number. It's 3 numbers up to 4 digits. Right. That all sounds great, but what are you going to use them for? And this is and this is actually where I believe that larger ad networks will struggle. If you have thousands or tens of thousands of clients, there's no way that you can put in a bespoke, tailored solution to each advertiser. We're not in that position. Sorry, I'm doing a bit of selling. I said I wouldn't. I truly do believe that a customized, tailored approach to how the source identifier or campaign IDs will lead to optimal solutions. So we will speak to our gaming clients and we will say to them, what's your budget? Are you likely to be over the publisher privacy threshold? If you're not, we may allocate some of those lower digits to publisher. So even if it comes in null, we'll still know that 39 means Flappy Bird's the publisher. We may allocate it to line items, so we know that it's a rewarded video line item in landscape on Flappy Bird's the publisher. We'll speak to our clients about how many geos are you running in, how many exchanges are you going to be running on, and we then may allocate this other digit to country. We may bucket countries together. We might bucket USA and Canada together. And then we will also be saying, well, how many creatives are you running? And we'll have a different configuration of this. I didn't do that. Hello. Shall I click again? Awesome. I'm back. Good. That was the evil that I gave those dudes at the back. Thank you very much. Great. So yes. So this is an example of how we will use. This is how we'll use campaign IDs. So, in summary, yes, I've got a minute left. Good. In summary, SKAN 4. What are the changes? Campaign IDs. Basically, the ad networks have more campaign IDs. We're kind of flying a bit blind. We're just up to 99 to optimize a campaign. We now have more. But honestly, most ad networks have been ignoring that because we've still got probabilistic. Conversion values. You now have up to 3 postbacks. This is certainly an area, if you're marketers, you're running gaming companies, you need to be investing in these postbacks. What is it that you're intending to get back and when? And do they fall into low, medium, or high coarse-grained values? And last but not least, and I say last but not least, it's quite simple to explain, so it didn't need to take up more real estate on my presentation. SKAN 4 can track mobile web, comes with a caveat. It's iOS operating system with the Safari browser only, but 90% of web traffic in iOS is from the Safari browser. So that's good. There's loads of valuable inventory, banner inventory, even search. Banner, search, video in mobile web can and will be tracked with SKAN 4. So, in conclusion, unless Apple enforces SKAN only, all of the challenges that I've been talking about are limited. the status quo of what we're experiencing now won't change much. If I say when, not if, I'm convinced that Apple will enforce a probabilistic ban, limitation, and SKAN will become a bigger and bigger topic. I also believe that those that have invested most in it are the ones that are going to survive and thrive. I do believe those that haven't invested in it and don't understand it and just outsourced it to someone else or don't care, I think it will be challenging. ROAS will be hard to drive, and I do believe that some demand will fall from the market. I see that as an opportunity. Those that have invested in it, those that do understand it, I think fill rates will drop a bit, ECPMs will drop a bit, and those that can survive and thrive in that environment will then be able to buy that inventory. And I believe in free markets, and I'm bullish about the future. But please also bear in mind that all of these different versions of SKAN are going to be around for a long time. So understanding their attributes is going to be critical to your success. And I hope that you've been able to get some tips and insights from my presentation today. We do a lot of research. I'll just call out some good research. AppsFly's got a great blog. Singular has got a great blog. I've listed my YouTube video here as well, which I recommend you read. And also there's still some ongoing documentation being published on Apple's website. They don't tell anyone. I've just got a bunch of engineers that are checking every day. Keep your eye on the Apple blogs as well. I'm 30 seconds over. That's the end of my presentation.